Um, Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little different for you.
Yeah, it's definitely not our usual format.
No, not at all. We aren't just analyzing a book today. We are essentially stepping into a time machine.
A very specific time machine,
Right. We are going back to Saturday night, March 25th, 1967.
which is just a fascinating date to drop in on.
Right.
The world is in absolute turmoil. You've got the Vietnam War escalating. The summer of love is literally just around the corner, and the whole counterculture thing is really starting to boil over.
But we aren't going to a protest
No.
or a concert. We are heading to a very quiet, very unassuming living room in Elmira, New York.
Sitting right in with Jane Roberts.
Exactly. Jane Roberts, the medium, her husband, Robert, who she usually calls Joseph, who's scribing all this down, and of course the energy personality essence known as Seth.
Speaking through Jane.
Right. And just so you have all the specifics, the source we are analyzing today is session 330 of the early sessions, book 7 of Seth Material, and the date of record is, like we said, March 25th, 1967.
And before we get too deep into the weeds here, we should probably declare right off the bat that this deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Yes, absolutely. Free of charge, educational purposes, because honestly, our goal here is to really unpack this specific session. The vibe of this one is just,
It's different.
it's so different. It's chilling.
Yeah, chilling is the perfect word for it.
And I don't mean like scary movie chilling,
No.
but chilling in how atmospheric and just incredibly precise it is, because we have a very strange set of circumstances in this living room.
You've got Jane and Robert, sure, but there's a guest.
Right. Pat Norelli.
Pat is a high school teacher. She's visiting from Boston. And she brought a piece of technology with her that was, well, it was quite the commitment to lug around in 1967.
A reel-to-reel tape recorder.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Not a smartphone, a big, clunky tape recorder.
And she has a very specific goal for this. She wants Seth, this disembodied consciousness speaking through her friend Jane, to record a lecture.
Yeah, but not just for her.
No, for her students.
Mhm.
Her exceptional students back at the high school in Boston.
So just, if you're listening to this, just picture that scene for a second.
It's wild.
It is late at night. A woman in upstate New York goes into a deep trance. Her voice completely changes, and she prepares to deliver this intense lecture on the nature of reality to a classroom of teenagers hundreds of miles away.
Teenagers who are going to listen to it on a Monday morning.
Right. It sounds like the setup for a sci-fi novel.
It totally does. But it's actually one of the most practical and profound sessions in the entire archive. We're going to cover everything from Seth's incredibly blunt dating advice.
Oh, the roast. We have to talk about the roast.
Oh, we're getting to the roast of Pat's love life, don't worry. And then a lecture on war. And finally, the actual mind-bending mechanics of how we create physical matter.
And we also have to mention that there's a moment in this session involving astral projection that is genuinely spooky.
Yeah, where Jane doesn't just talk to the class on the tape.
She actually visits the class.
It's wild. But before we get into the heavy metaphysics, and believe me, you are going to hear all about hallucinating furniture and the illusion of death today, we have to start where the session starts.
Right, because before Seth addresses the universe, he addresses Pat Norelli,
He decides to play love doctor.
which is quite the transition. I mean, you sit down expecting high philosophy from the beyond, and suddenly you're in the middle of a relationship intervention.
Yeah, Pat is apparently interested in a man named Brian. And Seth, well, Seth does not mince words.
He really doesn't. He just starts analyzing this guy, Brian. He describes him as a passive, submissive,
He says Brian is obsessed with security.
but then he flips the mirror right back onto Pat.
And this is where it gets really psychologically deep. Because Seth identifies Pat as the hunter.
Yes, I love that quote. He says, the questioner is obviously the hunter. The questioner also enjoys the chase for the sake of a chase.
That is just so cutting.
It really is.
He's basically telling her, you don't actually like this guy. You just like the sport of trying to get him.
Which brings up this concept that Seth introduces here, the counterfeit emotion.
Right. Counterfeit excitement. Let's unpack that for everyone.
Yeah.
What exactly does he mean by counterfeit in this context?
Well, think about why we chase people who are emotionally unavailable, or people who are just clearly wrong for us.
Right.
Is it because we genuinely connect with them? Usually, no.
Mm-hmm.
Seth argues that we do it to distract ourselves. He tells Pat flat out that she's using this romantic obsession to avoid the much harder work of her own self-development.
That is a heavy hitter.
It is.
So by obsessing over, will he call, won't he call, what's he thinking, she's burning up all this energy that she should be using to actually figure out who she is.
Precisely. Seth tells her, you are in effect putting the responsibility for your own development where it does not belong. And you're turning your destiny over to another person.
Wow.
It's a defense mechanism. If you're busy chasing a man you subconsciously know you can't have.
You're safe.
Exactly. You're completely safe. You don't ever have to face your own potential.
Because if you actually caught him, you'd probably be bored.
Right. Seth even says she wouldn't be happy with him if she got him. He says she chose him specifically because he is unattainable. It keeps this counterfeit game going.
It's like a substitute for real life.
Yeah, it's like eating junk food instead of a real meal. It tastes like food, it tricks your brain for a second, but it gives you absolutely zero nutrition.
That is such a relatable trap, though. I think a lot of us have been there, fixating on a crush because it's just so much easier than fixing our career or dealing with our internal state.
It's the path of least resistance.
Speaking of career, though, Seth doesn't just tear down her love life. He pivots to her talent.
He does. He validates her teaching ability. He says she has a real talent for sparking enthusiasm in young people.
But then he gets incredibly specific about something else.
Yes, the writing. He tells her she has real writing ability.
And then not just, oh, you should write a book someday.
No, he specifies historical works. And he specifically mentions the Tudor period.
That is wildly specific.
It is.
He's telling a high school teacher in 1967, hey, you should write fiction about the Tudors.
It just shows the level of detail that Seth can access. He isn't giving her generic horoscope advice here, like, you will find creativity next month.
Right.
He's reading her soul's blueprint. He sees that she is wasting all this vital energy on this childish game of romance when she could be channeling that exact same intensity into this very specific creative work.
So the takeaway for you listening right now is pretty clear. Look at where you are pouring your obsessive energy.
Ask yourself if it's a counterfeit chase.
Yeah. Are you hunting something external just to avoid building something internal?
It's the ultimate call to self-responsibility. Stop outsourcing your excitement to other people.
Okay, so Pat gets her life read for filth by theft.
She does.
But she takes it really well. And then the session shifts gears. Pat finally turns on the tape recorder.
The main event.
The goal is to record this message for her class in Boston. Which brings us to what we're calling segment 2, the spooky projection.
This is the part that genuinely gives me chills every time I read the transcript.
So set the scene for us. What exactly happens?
Okay, so Jane is in Elmira, New York. She's sitting in her usual rocking chair, eyes closed, deep in a trance, channeling Seth. But as she starts speaking to the students via this tape recorder, something in the room shifts.
Her voice changes, right?
It gets much deeper, much more resonant. Jane later described it in her own notes as a surging of power.
And she's not just sitting in the room anymore.
No. According to Jane's notes and Seth's own commentary later, Jane's consciousness, or at least a portion of it, literally leaves Elmira and travels to Boston.
To high school.
To the exact classroom where the tape will eventually be played.
But wait, the classroom is empty at that moment, right? Because it's Saturday night.
Right, it's empty in physical time. But Jane projects there. She describes seeing the layout of the room. She sees a long, continuous blackboard.
Okay.
She sees all the empty seats. She says she felt like she was looking down on the room from above, and then suddenly she was standing vertically right in the middle of it.
And then Seth, speaking through Jane's physical body in New York, interrupts his own lecture to point out a specific student.
Yes. This is the big aha moment for the paranormal aspect of this entire session. Right in the middle of talking about philosophy, Seth suddenly says there is a boy in a third or fourth seat, back from the front in the left row, toward the wall.
He's pinpointing a physical location.
Third or fourth seat, left row, and then he drops a massive metaphysical bomb about this kid.
What does he say?
He says he is on the last reincarnation within this system.
Whoa! Let's just pause on that for a second. Last reincarnation.
Meaning, this student is an old soul. He is finishing his cycle on Earth.
Imagine being that kid.
I know.
You walk into class on a Monday morning. Your teacher plays a tape that she recorded hundreds of miles away over the weekend. And a ghost voice singles you out and says, hey, you in the third seat. You're almost done with Earth.
It's incredibly validating, but also completely unnerving. But what it does is it validates that time and space are just not barriers for consciousness.
No, not at all.
Seth is completely aware of the room, the layout, the students, and even their spiritual histories, all from a living room in New York.
And Jane's reaction after she came out of the session is really interesting, too. She was super disoriented, wasn't she?
Very. She had trouble snapping out of the trance. She said she was really out, which suggests that to bridge that kind of distance and deliver that level of specific data, she had to go incredibly deep.
Yeah.
She mentions in her notes that she felt a strange surging and that her voice took on this distant quality, like it was coming from a long way off.
It really emphasizes that this wasn't just a casual, parlor trick.
Not at all.
This was a high energy transmission, and that energy was necessary because of what Seth was about to tell these students.
Which brings us to the actual lecture itself.
Right. The mission for the students.
Mhm.
Seth doesn't treat these teenagers like kids.
He doesn't talk down to them for a second.
No, he really respects them. He even cracks a joke right at the beginning to break the ice.
Yeah, he says, I am no beady-eyed spirit. I am no granddaddy longlegs of the spirit world.
Granddaddy Longlegs of the spirit world. I just love that image.
It's great. He's establishing right away that he isn't some spooky monster hiding in the dark. He's just a personality who happens to not have a physical body right now.
And once he's got their attention, he hits them with the core concept of the entire Seth material, probably the most famous concept he ever teaches.
Reality creation.
So you just read the quote. It's iconic.
He tells the classroom of kids, as you sit listening to my voice, you are all subconsciously forming the physical environment of your classroom. You are forming the physical chairs.
You are forming the physical chairs. Okay, so look, I'm sitting in a chair right now.
Right.
It feels pretty solid. I bought it at a furniture store. I definitely didn't form it. What exactly is Seth talking about here?
He is not speaking metaphorically. And that is the absolute most crucial thing to understand about this.
Okay.
He isn't saying you perceive the chair or you have an opinion about the chair. He is saying you literally create it.
Oh. How do I create a chair just by sitting there?
Seth argues that the physical world is a result of consciousness, not the other way around. Atoms and molecules are just energy. Consciousness acts upon that energy to pattern it into solid matter.
So the kids are doing this together.
Yes. He says the students are telepathically agreeing on what he calls root assumptions.
Root assumptions. So we all have this secret subconscious telepathic agreement that, okay, guys, a chair looks like this, it feels solid, and gravity pulls it down to the floor.
Exactly that. It is effectively a mass hallucination that we all agree on so that we can have a coherent shared experience.
Wow.
Think about it. If we didn't agree on those root assumptions, I might look at a chair and see a solid object, and you might look at it and see a cloud of floating gas.
You're right. We wouldn't be able to interact at all.
Exactly. So to interact, we telepathically coordinate our construction of reality. Constantly.
That is just mind-bending. So the classroom literally doesn't exist until the students walk in and essentially dream it into existence.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
He says, it is all in one respect hallucinatory, and yet it is your reality and you must deal with it.
He's a really interesting phrase for the physical senses too, doesn't he?
Yes. He calls the physical senses lovely liars.
Lovely liars. That's so poetic.
Because they deceive you. Your eyes tell you the chair is solid. But physics, and Seth, tells you it is mostly empty space held together by energy fields. Your senses create a faithful replica of your thoughts, but they deliberately hide the mechanism of creation from you.
So for a teenager in 1967, sitting in a boring high school classroom, hearing a voice on a tape tell them that they're actually powerful wizards hallucinating their own desks into solidity, that must have been incredibly empowering.
It completely shifts the locus of control.
Yeah.
You aren't a victim of your environment anymore. You are the creator of your environment.
Which naturally leads directly into the next major topic Seth tackles. Because in 1967, there was a massive elephant in every room in America.
The war?
The Vietnam War. These are high school students.
Yeah.
The boys in that room are facing draft in a year or two.
The war is on the news every single night. The counterculture is protesting in the streets. The tension in the air is just palpable.
So Seth addresses it head on. But he doesn't take a political side, strictly speaking.
No, he takes a metaphysical side.
Right. And just to remind you listening, we're just reporting what Seth says here. We're not taking any political stances ourselves. We're just looking at the source material.
Exactly. And Seth starts with an absolute statement. He says, there is never any justification for war, and there is never any justification for killing.
Which sounds like standard pacifism on the surface. But there's a real twist to his logic, isn't there?
The twist is entirely about the nature of death. Seth teaches that death is an illusion. The soul survives physical deaths completely intact.
So a critic might listen to that and say, well, if death isn't real, why does it matter if we kill each other? Nobody really dies anyway.
Right, it's like a video game. You just respawn.
Exactly.
But Seth shuts that loophole down immediately. He says, since you have created death, you are left to deal with it.
What does he mean by that?
It means that within this specific system of reality, the physical world, we have collectively agreed that death is real. We experience the loss, we feel the pain, we live through the tragedy of it.
The root assumptions again.
Exactly. As long as you believe a bullet can end a life, you are fully responsible for pulling the trigger. You cannot use high-level metaphysics as an excuse for low-level violence.
That is a deeply fascinating ethical stance. You have to play by the rules of the reality you are currently materialized in.
Precisely. And from there, he pivots to the generation gap, which, again, this is 1967.
Don't trust anyone over 30.
That was the motto. The kids are angry, and they are blaming their parents for the terrible state of the world.
And Seth, he kind of defends the parents, doesn't he?
Well, not exactly defends, but he challenges the students' hypocrisy. He
Right.
says, yes, the world in which your parents live is a world which they created. But then he issues this intense warning to the teenagers.
That if they just sit around criticizing the elders, they're going to fall into the exact same trap.
He talks about the cycle. The young rebel against the old, but then they grow up, they get the power, and they become the exact same rigid adults that they used to hate.
So what's his solution?
He says, you must change ideas if you would change the world. It is the idea of war, then, that you must fight.
The idea of war. Okay, this connects right back to the lovely liars and the chairs.
Yes, it does.
If we create physical reality with our thoughts, then a war isn't just a political event happening overseas. It is a literal materialization of our own inner violence.
That is the absolute core message of this section. He tells the students, if you see but one item within your universe and it disgusts you, then look within yourself, for you have helped create it.
Ouch. That is some tough medicine.
It really is.
So if I look at the news and I see war and corruption and greed, I can't just point fingers at politicians. I have to actually ask, where is the war inside me?
Yes. Seth calls this the exploration of inner space. He says this is the true frontier. It's not outer space. It's not a political revolution in the streets. It is the revolution of the inner self.
Because if you change your expectations and your internal thoughts, the outer world literally has to change to match it.
It's radical responsibility. He's basically saying that peace protests are useless if the people protesting are filled with hate for the people they're protesting against.
Wow. Yeah, you can't fight for peace. You have to actually be peace.
Otherwise, you are just rearranging the furniture. And remember, you're the one hallucinating the furniture in the first place.
It all comes back to the furniture. I love that. Okay, so moving into the next part of the lecture. Seth has told them they create the chairs. He's told them they are responsible for war. Now he goes straight for their identity.
He attacks the whole concept of age. He tells them, you may think that you are 16 years old, but you are ancient.
This 16-year-old fallacy.
We identify so strongly with our current age, our current name, our current social status.
Sure, it's all we know.
But Seth says this is just the tiny tip of the iceberg. He makes this fascinating distinction between genetic memory and psychic memory.
Right, because science says our history is in our chromosomes.
But Seth says the memories of past lives aren't in the physical chromosomes at all. They are in the psychic reality that actually forms the chromosomes.
It's a completely top-down approach. The soul creates the genetics, not the other way around.
And he asks him this genuinely funny rhetorical question. He says, what does your inner identity have to do with the self that brushes your teeth?
I love that, the toothbrushing self.
It perfectly captures it.
That's the ego, right? The little me that worries about being late for third period and getting cavities and who's taking me to prom.
Yes, that's the toothbrushing self. But the inner self, that self knows it has lived 100 times before. It knows it will live again. And it operates completely outside of linear time.
Which gets us into one of Seth's heavier concepts, the eternal now.
Right. Seth claims that the past, the present, and the future all exist simultaneously.
Which is so hard for our brains to wrap around.
It is. He tells the students, you can influence the past today. You can have memory of the future.
Memory of the future. That just sounds like a paradox.
In a linear view, absolutely. But imagine time is like a vast landscape, and you were just walking through it. The future is already sitting there over the next hill. You can remember it, just like you remember the road you just walked down.
And he says we can actually draw strength from our future selves.
Yes. The you that you will eventually become already exists right now. You can tap into that wisdom today.
That is such an incredibly empowering thought, especially for a teenager who probably feels lost or incomplete.
You don't have to endlessly strive to become somebody. You already are that realized person. You just have to catch up to it in the illusion of time.
And where does all this real living actually happen? Because he says it's not happening in the classroom.
No, it happens in dreams.
This is the other major pillar of this lecture to the students. Seth totally flips the script on sleep. We usually think waking life is the real thing, and dreams are just random hallucinations.
Seth says it is exactly the opposite.
Right.
He says the waking world is the hallucination. It's the rigid camouflage reality we agree upon. The dream world is where you are truly awake, truly educated, and truly free.
He tells them, you learn more in a night of dreaming than in a day of high school.
I am absolutely sure the students loved hearing that part.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Mom, sleeping in class is actually high-level spiritual work. Seth said so.
Well, maybe not sleeping during math class, but sleeping at night, yes. He argues that in dreams, we travel, we solve complex problems, we connect with our broader multidimensional identity.
And then we wake up.
And we squeeze ourselves right back into the toothbrushing self. And we forget almost everything we learned.
It really just reframes the entire human experience. Instead of being this vulnerable physical animal that has occasional weird dreams at night.
We are a massive spiritual giant that has occasional weird moments of being physical.
That is a beautiful way to put it. We are spirits having a physical experience. And the classroom of Earth is just one small room in this massive mansion of consciousness.
Exactly.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into session 330, what is the ultimate takeaway here? Seth leaves these students, and by extension, all of us, with a real challenge.
He gives them a command. He says, shatter then these artificial boundaries. And he specifically warns them against growing old into senility. Instead, he urges them to grow into wisdom.
Senility versus wisdom. It's framed as a choice.
It is a choice.
Yeah.
And senility in this specific context isn't just a medical condition of the brain.
No.
It is the rigidifying of the mind. It's believing that the world is fixed. It's believing that you are a victim of circumstance, that you are just a physical body that is destined to decay and die.
Whereas wisdom is...
Wisdom is realizing you are the creator.
Right.
That you are eternal, and that the physical world is completely pliable to your thoughts.
It's really about staying fluid.
Exactly. If you believe you're just a physical organism bound by time, you're going to live a very small, very fearful life. But if you believe you are part of all that is unlimited and creative, your entire life expands.
It's just such a powerful message. And it doesn't matter if you were a high school student sitting in Boston in 1967 or if you're listening to us right now in the 2020s. The physics of reality just don't change.
You're still making the chairs?
You're still making the chairs. And you are still responsible for what you create with them.
Yeah.
Before we sign off today, we want to make sure credit is given exactly where it is due. This incredible material comes directly from the Seth Material and the publisher, New Awareness Network.
And if your mind is suitably blown by all this, and honestly, how could it not be? You really need to go straight to the source.
We highly, highly recommend it. We encourage all of you listening to study the Seth Material books for yourselves. You can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore to find all of this at sethcenter.com, the early sessions.
Seriously, go check it out. There are thousands of pages of this material, and every single session is just an absolute goldmine.
It is a rabbit hole that is truly worth falling down.
Oh.
So here is our final thought for you to chew on today as you go about your week. Early in the session, Seth told Pat that the excitement of the chase is counterfeit.
Right.
And later he told the students, you are forming the physical chairs.
What's the connection there?
Well, maybe it's this. Stop chasing the things you think are real. The romance, the status, the solid objects, because they are just props on a stage that you built.
Yeah.
Start paying attention to the builder. Start paying attention to the you that is dreaming this whole thing up.
Stop looking at the reflection and start looking at the face in the mirror.
Exactly. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We will see you in the next stream.
Or the next reincarnation. Take care, everyone.